Okay, so we're going to talk for a few minutes about how distrust between the Soviet Union and the United States started even before World War II is over. As you remember, the Soviet Union and the United States had been allies during the war, and they had a common goal of trying to defeat Germany and Japan and the rest of the Axis powers. And so, as we get near the end of the war, and by then you can kind of see the areas in red here, the Soviet Union had taken back from Germany places like Poland, Czechoslovakia, Romania, the eastern part of Germany. And you can see that the US, along with France and Great Britain, had taken control of France again, and Italy and Belgium, and the western part of Germany. And in early 1945, the leaders of the Soviet Union, Great Britain, and the United States meet at Yalta. That's kind of on the northern coast of the Black Sea, part of the Soviet Union. And so Prime Minister Churchill of Britain, President Roosevelt of the US, and Joseph Stalin, leader of the Soviet Union, meet. And they start to talk about what's the world going to be like after the war. And they agree that these places they've taken over will have free elections after the war is over, and let the people of those places like Poland or France decide for themselves what kind of governments they want to have. But this really creates tension because the Soviet Union and Stalin basically renege on that promise. They argue that those places need to provide a buffer for the Soviet Union. And so he establishes them as communist satellite nations. And so that creates quite a bit of distrust that he went back on that promise to allow them free elections. By the summer of 1945, a couple things have changed. One, Germany is now defeated by then. And also, President Roosevelt has passed away, and President Harry Truman is now in charge of the U.S. and U.S. Military policy. And so Stalin, Truman, and Churchill meet in Potsdam, Germany, in the newly occupied Germany. And they mainly are there to do a couple things. One is to talk about rebuilding Germany, but also to talk about how to defeat Japan, with whom the US and Britain and others are still at war. And so Stalin agrees that the Soviet Union will go to war against Japan. But during those talks, President Truman knows that we have another edge, if you will, the atomic bomb, but he doesn't tell Joseph Stalin about that. Now, Stalin had heard through spy networks and everything that the U.S. had the bomb, but for the fact that Truman didn't tell him about the A bomb, Stalin really comes to distrust the U.S. even more. And so it's just important to understand that in the process of defeating Germany and Japan and the Axis powers, there's a growing distrust between the communist Soviet Union and the capitalist democratic United States.